Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Bible study. Today we're talking about Genesis chapter 39 in 5 minutes. Let's jump in. If you want the PDF, you can download it for free on our website at tobelikechrist.com. When did the events of this chapter take place? Well, we're going to be talking about Joseph, who we were introduced to back a couple chapters ago. Joseph was sold into slavery in Egypt by his brothers when he was 17 years old. So that'd be approximately 1728 BC. Our main characters, our first one is Joseph. Joseph was the favorite son of his father Jacob, and he was sold into slavery by his brothers because his brothers hated him. Then we're introduced to a guy here named Potiphar. He was an officer of Pharaoh's and the captain of the guard, and also Potiphar's wife. She is going to lie about Joseph in this chapter and get him thrown into prison. In terms of our map, this one's pretty easy. These events took place in the country of Egypt, but we're not told where specifically or a specific city where they took place. For our outline of this chapter, beginning with our first section, verses 1 through 6, Joseph in Potiphar's house. So after Joseph was sold by his brothers into slavery, he was brought down to Egypt by the Ishmaelites, and he was sold again, and he was purchased by a guy named Potiphar, who was an officer of Pharaoh's. And Joseph, to his credit, served Potiphar very faithfully. And Potiphar noticed that everything that Joseph did was blessed, and he recognized that the Lord was with Joseph, and so he made him the overseer of all of his property and all of his possessions. And Potiphar's house really flourished while Joseph was the overseer of all of those things. So things are going relatively well for Joseph in Egypt. That is until our second section, verses 6b through verse 20. Potiphar's wife lies about Joseph. The text tells us that Joseph was very handsome in form and in appearance, and Potiphar's wife took notice of this, and she tried to seduce him, but he refused her advances. He told her that he couldn't betray Potiphar, who had entrusted him with so much, but she continued to try to seduce him, and he continued to refuse. One day, while he was in the house alone with her, trying to do his work, she grabbed his garment, and he took off running, trying to get out of the house, but his garment was left behind. Potiphar's wife lied to her husband and told him that it was actually Joseph who was trying to seduce her, but when she cried out, he ran away and left his garment behind. Potiphar unfortunately trusted his wife, and he was furious at Joseph, and he threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were kept. So then in verses 21 through 23, our last section, Joseph in prison. The text says, quote, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." Joseph was put in charge of all the daily tasks of the prison, and the keeper of the prison trusted him so much that he didn't even bother to check on his work. And we're told that whatever Joseph did, the Lord caused it to succeed. And so that is Genesis chapter 39. Now let's talk about our application. Being a servant of God doesn't always mean that you get immediate justice, but it does mean that you will never be separated from the love of God. Joseph was thrown into prison for doing the right thing, and he wasn't immediately vindicated for the injustice that was done to him. But the text tells us that God showed steadfast love to him when he was in the prison. Being in God's love doesn't mean that you're never going to be treated unfairly. It means God will never forsake you, and eventually, as the New Testament tells us, he'll work all things for good. That's true even when you are mistreated by a sinful world.